Hello everyone, welcome. Thanks for tuning in today if you're watching us. I am with the amazing Katie Kettner, who is a women's health physio based in the north of England. She has a diploma in counselling. She's also working on a diploma in psychosexual medicine and studying a pastoral certificate in, I'm not going to get this name right, Loyola University in Chicago. Yeah. Well,
awesome.
Hey. In the study of psychology of human development and our quest for meaning. She describes herself as a deep and fierce, passionate person for women. She is deep and fierce and passionate.
Yeah.
I think it's great, with a huge amount of empathy towards women and helping them to celebrate and honour them and our womanness. The desire has led her to some fascinating discoveries in all sorts of fields, including neuroscience and psychology, which is helping her to develop a more holistic way of approaching patients as a physiotherapist. So welcome, Katie Kettner.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good morning. Now, we met a while ago when you came onto one of my Happy Bladder courses.
Yeah.
Your passion was clear at the time. Like, I love this is great, I'm going to do great stuff with patients. And throughout the journey of being people that have been on my course, people that don't know, I call you all bladder heroes who join my tribe, and we try and continually meet and contact and communicate and build our holistic skills. And you've always been kind of a vocal member of the group, which is lovely. And recently you did a presentation. Do you want to talk about that to the school?
Yeah, so I got asked to, a school approached me and they do this kind of Wellness Wednesday, which is awesome. And I think they've been seeing a few things that I've been putting on to kind of social media, and they were interested in, they get different speakers to come in and do sessions with kids, and they were interested, they had a term based on self-care, and they were interested for me to come in and do, give some perspective on kind of from a women's health physio point of view. So it was awesome.
I'd love that if all courses could do this, all schools could do this.
I know, yeah, it's amazing. So they get someone different in every Wednesday to come in and work with them. They kind of got loads of different fields of people. So I had a really good think about what messages do I want to give across to them. And I've been reading a lot, especially over the summer, a lot of Kristen Neff stuff. She's a kind of a psychologist in America, and Dr. Caroline Leaf, who's a neuroscientist. And they're talking a lot about this kind of self-care and how do we really understand it as much as we do, and focusing a lot on self-compassion. So I kind of went in with that idea of trying to get them more on board with self-compassion as opposed to self-esteem, which I think is the big billion-dollar industry at the minute, which is driven, but whether or not it's kind of helping as much as we think is the debate. That's kind of where Kristen Neff kind of comes from, which is really interesting. So that's kind of where it started from, that I went into the school and talked about self-compassion.
And from that, I mean, you shared with us some of the feedback from the students, and we were all blown away because it looked fantastic. And from that, as kind of we started a bit of a conversation about self-care and compassion, self-compassion, which we're going to talk about in a second, within physio, because in such a healing sphere, it is incredibly important that we as physiotherapists, or as therapists in any way, have a good strategy of self-care and self-compassion.
Absolutely.
And imbue ourselves with those skills so that we are able to give. And quite often, I mean, I burnt out sometime in November. I've had quite a tough year. And November was really tough, and it's been good to have a little holiday over Christmas, just to kind of come back to work again yesterday and feel full again, and able just to sit in those vulnerable spaces with people. But when you're not full yourself, you can't sit comfortably in those spaces with people and be able to help them find their way through them, because you just don't have the ability to give of yourselves. And I know we've had lots of different conversations about how you shouldn't, people say, oh, well, you shouldn't give your patients everything. But I think if anything in pelvic health, you have to be able to go where your patients need you to. And sometimes that does require a lot of emotional energy. It doesn't mean you're expressing yourself. So what I wanted to do today was talk about use your knowledge and pick your brains about how we can bring self-compassion and self-care into physiotherapy to start our 2019, because this is massively important.
Yeah.
Let's start the year in
absolutely.
the best way.
Because even when I've been doing this, starting the psychosexual medicine course, and it kind of, do you know that thing when you go on all these different courses and you're like, oh my gosh, everything's connecting, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And they were talking about this whole idea of transference with patients and counter-transference. You know, when you go in the room and you know that we naturally tend to feel like, you know, physio's quite good, we pick up on where patients are at. But there's a huge part of the treatment session is counter-transference as well. So what the patient actually picks up from you, and there's so much science behind it. It's the mirror neurons in your body, you know, it's the mirror neuron activity. But so really, we kind of, you know, that's why they're saying we have such a powerful effect on our patients. We can make such a big difference just by being compassionate towards them. And in the research that she does, Kristen Neff on self-compassion, there was no differentiation between compassion for yourself and compassion for others.
Right, okay.
It actually came out that if you can't really effectively be compassionate towards another person unless you're compassionate towards yourself, which kind of connects to what we're talking about in this kind of psychosexual medicine, that you need to kind of be not necessarily avoiding stress or anything like that, because good stress is good for you, and kind of, you know, life brings all sorts of waves and things like that, but it's about being connected to yourself, encouraging yourself to be connected and caring for yourself, so that you can make sure you're bringing a kind of healthy self to that treatment session as well.
Yeah, we all know those treatment sessions that you have with any healthcare provider. I know I see a doctor regularly. When you go in and they're there and you can just tell, even just their energy going into the room, that they're 5 patients behind and they haven't got time for you. Whereas there was one consultant I used to see a long time ago who I would sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours in clinic after my appointment, still having not been seen, but I'd never mind, because when I walked into the room finally, he would, you know, he'd put his pen down. It's those little things we talk about on the course about kind of psychological and body language skills. He'd put his pen down, the computer wasn't in front of him, he'd look at me and he'd say, how are you? And he really meant it. And if you did 8 minutes instead of 5, or if you needed 25 minutes, he'd spend that time with you, which is why he's always running late. But it meant that session was always really valuable. So how do we get to that point? Oh, well, do you want to talk actually to begin with about the difference between self-care and self-compassion and how they're different elements?
I'd say kind of self-compassion is a kind of way we take care of ourselves, basically, from a compassionate point of view. And it's kind of, I think the research kind of shown that it's kind of like this, it's a connected way, it's kind of not a lifestyle, but it kind of becomes a way that it's a way of connecting to yourself, to ensuring that you're giving yourself the things. It's about giving yourself permission for your needs, so that you can take care of other people as well. Because she kind of starts off, a lot of the research I was looking at the minute starts off by kind of seeing what self-esteem is, because the way we promote a lot of that, but that's about seeing yourself as above average, which some people might think that's, you know, it's a good thing. But what happens is, because it's kind of become global, is the bar that's set for average becomes higher and higher. So then what happens is it's become impossible to reach a place where you see yourself as above average, because the average bar becomes too high. And what she found is that there's huge waves of narcissism, especially in kind of universities and things like that. And that's down to this thing of people trying to become above a bar. So self-compassion it's the opposite, because it's more of an self-acceptance and accepting where you are and who you are. And the paradox in that is that you actually grow through that. But it's really good, because there's dimensions of it. You can totally approach it to patients, but you can totally approach it to yourself as well, in the way you make sure that you're, you know, taking care of yourself in your practice. And she kind of, it's kind of broken down into 3 elements, which I'm going to, if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
It's the idea of you've got self-kindness versus self-judgment. You've got common humanity versus isolation, and you've got what's the third one? Mindfulness versus over-identification. So that self-kindness is about, it's the active stance. So it's being able to physically alleviate yourself, from soothe yourself. Some of us are quite good at that. It's the ability to say, what do I need right now in this moment to make me feel better? So it's the kind of the active stance of self-compassion, really. And that can be different at different times. And the common humanity versus isolation is about recognizing that suffering or struggles or pain is part of a common human experience. You know, we're all human. Do humans suffer? Yeah. But what happens is when we experience something difficult or stressful or that we're struggling with, for some reason our brains go into an egocentric state. So you go into a state of why me? I'm the only one. And then what happens is that becomes quite dangerous, because then you isolate yourself. And then when you isolate yourself, you know, physiologically it's quite threatening. You know, evolutionarily, the worst thing that could have happened is you get isolated from your group because you're unsafe. So that we then put our bodies into a state of threat. So it's about recognizing, basically, can I be connected with other people via my suffering, as opposed to isolated. I'm whizzing through these, by the way. If you want me to slow down, just tell me to slow down.
No, this is good. This is good.
And then the mindfulness versus over-identification is just this idea that you have to be aware of your suffering in order so that you can give it compassion. Basically, you have to be aware of it, but you have to be with it. It's the ability to be with your suffering, to validate it, to acknowledge it. Quite often, especially I think as a professional, we're quite good at fixing it, just thinking, just want to fix it, get out of the way with. And actually, it's the ability to validate it, to acknowledge it, to give yourself permission for it, and say, "I'm okay. It's okay to be struggling right now." And that kind of goes into a lot of what I was looking at about the way we kind of speak about our struggles or our kind of pains or anything like that, how we talk to ourselves, and the kind of the power, that's the kind of real effect of that. And there's so much, obviously, by a lot of huge bodies of neuroscience I've been looking at about the effect of that. And, you know, so it's the way we're kind of speaking to ourselves and the language that we're using. And again, you know, it was so surprising. I did this talk in the school, and even the teacher who organised this self-care thing, she came to me afterwards and she was like, "I am so bad at talking to myself." You know, I'm just talking to myself. We don't realise. And we say things to ourselves that we wouldn't dare say to somebody else, but we actually do. You know, if you've got a patient to write down, I remember getting a patient to write down a really, really bad day, what she was saying to herself on a bit of paper. And she came in shocked at what she was saying to herself, because we do it automatically. Yeah. So it's the ability to really tap into that and switch it.
I think sorry, go on.
No, those are kind of in a really fast summed up way, kind of where the three components come from.
What I really liked about what you said when you and you put your presentation up in our group in that what I saw in it anyway, and having done, and you know my approach because you've done the course, but it very nicely sums up how I holistically approach patients as well. And it's really transferable. So the way that you've got the three different areas of that we need to work on as physios, but actually you can see that through working on those three areas, knowing them yourself a bit better, being more comfortable with them, that you're more than able to be that human with another human in the room. The energy that you project to your patients is going to be more compassionate, more caring. They're going to pick up on that, and therefore you're going to get so much more from the session. And also then you can approach your patients in the same way. And a lot of people, especially if they're kind of newer to the field, it can be really daunting at kind of opening up this kind of like psychological worms with patients. And I remember in the NHS, I was forever told, well, not forever, but definitely first couple of years, people would say to me, "Oh, you spend too much time on patients, or you do too much for them." Because if someone needed me to ring a GP, I'd ring a GP and I'd put myself a note every day to ring the GP. You know, you do what you say you're going to do. But just because I think my own personal health experience has taught me that actually these little things make a big difference. So let's break it down and kind of see how we can make it applicable, to ourselves as physios, but then also within our therapeutic approach. So the first kind of self-compassion, self-care. How do you approach self-care?
I think the biggest thing, especially with professionals, is, and this is the thing I was really thinking about when I knew we were going to have a chat, and I was like, I think it is the difficult thing to pinpoint from a health professional point of view, because it's really bizarre, but especially I'm in a field of something I'm really passionate about and I love it. And I think sometimes, I know we mentioned it before, that sometimes it can become a burden because you just want to do everything. You want to do it all, and you want to get better all the time. And that's where I think it's different from, I think, what I have to teach my patients to do quite often, because it's kind of, and it is a big thing that I've just been really thinking about lately. And I think it was in December, I came across a really good, I was kind of doing this kind of meditative reflection thing. And one question that came up, that it said, what do you need? Name sort of 2 or 3 things. Say, name 2 things that you need to do well in life. And then the second question was, what do you need to stop in order to do those things well? And that really, really made me think, because I kind of thought, right, well, being a mother and being a wife, my family is really important. That's something I need to do well. And then my calling, women's health is something I need to do well. So then I get those 2 things, and it was so surprising how many things I wrote down that I was like, that I do that, I'm committed to that, and that has nothing to do with either of those things. It's not. Whereas, and then you end up putting into, say 25% energy into all these categories. I
think that's such an important thing, especially if our current modern lifestyle, which is brilliant. Don't get me wrong, technology is a fantastic facilitator of lots of different things. The fact that I've got good colleagues all over the world that I clinically reason with that help me out, in Canada and in America and Australia, brilliant. But as well as the UK, hello. But it's also in our modern world where we see everything, we see what everyone else is doing, we can compare ourselves to it. You can become overburdened really quickly. And that can also, that translates into lots of, even kind of in a minute level. So in clinic, taking on the burden of redoing all the paperwork, doing the audit, as well as seeing all your patients, maybe responsible for a clinic, and all all the little organisational things. And certainly this year myself, I had we had some family illness, and I've reorganised. I've done exactly what you did, and I chucked everything. The only thing that I'm left with is the things that make my soul joyful, which is my education work and my clinic, and then my family. But all of the rest of the stuff, which I did because I was interested, I think I did a lot of work with our national body because I wanted to serve, and also be involved and be part of the conversation and leading the conversation, all of that kind of stuff, which it took up 10% of my time, but it was 10% that I wasn't spending on self-care. And you can burn out very quickly if you spread yourself incredibly thin. So that first step of working out what you actually want to do and how to do it, and being compassionate that you can't do everything, and it's okay. It's okay to not do everything. My plans for where I want to go with work and business and courses aren't compatible with what I want to do in life at the moment. So it's all just shelved, and it's okay to shelve for a couple of years. I think certainly in our generation, whatever you want to call it, we're the first main generation coming up through kind of internet technology, fast-paced, high pressure lifestyle. We're the last generation to live before mobile phones, and then to get mobile phones when we were teenagers. So that connectivity and that I must, which can often, especially professionally, make you feel quite despondent about your abilities. And in women's health, where we are in a cubicle on our own, or in a room on our own, or in a hospital on our own, with a patient, it can be difficult to then go, am I doing the right thing? Is this right for this patient? So self-care, knowing yourself, is really important. There's a great resource. My friend and mentor and good friend of the family, Jazz Ampalfar, who I will put a link to underneath this video. She's just done a Bin Your Resolutions resolution pack, which takes you nicely through. She's a teacher. She's an amazing photographer, internationally renowned. She's a mum. She did an amazing TED lecture. She's been on The Apprentice. She's done lots of stuff. Anyway, she's an amazing motivational speaker and coach. And she's done a resolution maker where you can look at all the different facets of your life and actually hone down what's important. And I think it's important to do it this time of year when we're all reflective, but maybe also if you're coming to this video later on in the year, just have a go at it, have a look at it, reevaluate if you're feeling burnt out, because we cannot provide a level of service to our patients if we're feeling burnt out. I've got I think back to somewhere around about like 2010. I think I was working in pelvic pain clinic, which it's a nice way of saying 80-90% of patients have been raped or abused in some way. There's lots of post-operative complications. It's quite a difficult space to be in, and I was quite a green physio, and I picked up all the patients, and I was seeing, because the clinic happened once a month and it was an intense clinic, I picked up all the patients, and for some reason they all came in one day from that clinic to see my usual clinic, and I think I got through 8 in a row. And there was a point I came back to the desk and was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is just intense. Always crying, wanting to take a sledgehammer to several men, just because the amount of stuff that's coming out with. And actually, now having done that for years, when 80% of every day of mine, every day is pelvic pain, what I specialise in, it's now easy, and that's the difference in learning self-care and self-compassion techniques. So what I think it is difficult to look at specific techniques, but I think maybe you can share some of yours. What I tend to do is try and be reflective continuously. So when I'm sat in front of a patient who is maybe expressing very particular sexual details, which may not be at all in my sexual repertoire, something that would be quite shocking to me. You've got the blank face, because I'm trying to project I am not judgmental, do what you will with your body if it's consensual. And then logging that's something that people do, and then feeling okay with that, because then it's now within my experience professionally. Or if certainly with this year when we've had some family ill health, if a patient brings up a terrible story of someone in their family that's died of cancer, then I will at that moment just go, I know this is going to make me feel a bit sad, so I'm just going to put that over there a little bit, and this is a professional conversation. So just being continually reflective helps me, and feeling sometimes if I've got certain patients that I've carried with me for years who I will endlessly be there for, and they know who they are, and they're probably going to watch this, so I'm not going to mention their names, but there are certain people where they've been incredibly drawing, they draw you into their experience. It's incredibly emotive, and I will sit there and very gently go, wow, I'm starting to feel tense, notice the tension in my body because of their story. I put up an imaginary barrier and I increase the space, and it's just as simple as sitting back in your chair, breathing, thinking about something else for a moment, imagining a barrier to what they're saying so that you're not emotional, so that you can then continue speaking. That's what I do. What do you do?
It really reminds me, because I'm having a really interesting conversation. I've got a good friend who's a psychotherapist in Ireland, and we were having this conversation, and she was saying about the importance of taking care of yourself, and she almost came up with the idea of she kind of symbolically does something. So if she's seeing clients at home, she likes like a little candle in the room, and she kind of blows out that candle after a session, and it's her way of saying, I'm leaving this room, and I'm leaving, especially if something really difficult to come up. Or she'll say, kind of open a window, and she'll leave the window open for a minute or two, and she'll shut the window, and it's kind of, your body needs something physically to kind of symbolize your emotional, right, I'm leaving this room. But I tend to find reflect is really good. There's this, what's it called, before 4 R's. I mean, you can take them whatever kind of form you want, but it's kind of replay, rejoice, repent, reboot. And it's kind of this idea that you replay your day, because it's quite often things come up that, like you say, that made me kind of feel a little bit of turmoil, a little bit uncomfortable, but then you push it aside and you carry on with your day. Really good to bring that back up at the end of the day. So replay kind of what maybe went well, what didn't, why did I feel a certain way, what was it that patient said that kind of made me, you know, feel whatever. And then the second R is about just spending time what went well in the day, kind of being thankful for those things, helping all those, and then the kind of repent, what ways did I not love myself in the day, or maybe didn't love others, or kind of looking at those feelings and thinking, why did I feel that way? And then the reboot is really important, because it's like, what right now do I need to make myself for tomorrow, to prepare for tomorrow? And sometimes it's surprising when you really can connect to those feelings, how different the reboot can be.
Yeah.
Depending on what you've experienced in that day. It might just be like a hot bath, but it might be something more active, or it might be something that you really need to actively kind of step back from these emotions that were in this room today, or, you know.
There's a really good resource that LJ Lee used to provide with a map of your week, and she gives it to patients as well as to physios, and it has all of the different areas of human experience, from you know, you need to basically to spend time during your week to have a balanced week, to feel better, to feel better for you, and to be compassionate to yourself. So it's making sure that you're spending time with friends, spending time with family, spending time outdoors. You need to see nature, you need to do exercise, you need to have good sleep, have good nutrition, good spiritual well-being. I can't remember what the other ones are, and she'd say you can do a mini version of that each day. So have I today had some exercise, seen some trees, that kind of stuff. But then on a bigger scale, you're not going to go for a hike every day and sleep for 12 hours, you know, 10 hours every day. But she'd say, over the course of the week, have I spent some time with my family, my friends, all the rest of it? And that's been really useful for me, because especially when you work, and a lot of us work in different clinics or all over the place, it's difficult to have a regular routine and pattern. But that reboot, I like that, your 4 R's. You're gonna have to put that online for us. But it's that reboot can sometimes, last night, for me, I needed to watch The Crown. I needed to just switch off completely from everything. And not carry the trauma of the day with me. But sometimes, but before that, I'd gone to the gym. So there was, you know, some exercise. Exercising always really, really helps me to feel much more and able to kind of put it away. But also knowing that, it is okay. It's just so okay if you do carry stuff with you, and that it's playing on your mind. That's the moment at which you need to reach out to reboot. When you're challenged with patients, this is something that with students, I know we spend a lot of time trying to get across that you're not meant to come out fully understanding and knowing everything in physio. So asking questions is okay, and being wrong is absolutely fine. You know, the only time that we're never completely correct in anything. So those moments where you're really carrying stuff with you, that's the time to reach out. And we've got amazing support groups online, and all the kind of Facebook international groups in our Bladder Heroes. If you've got colleagues you can talk to. I recently thought I was getting everything completely wrong with a patient, because everyone does it sometimes, and with a bit of motor imagery stuff that I was doing. So I did a bit of filming and sent it out to a friend in Canada, who then went, have you tried all of these things? And I went, oh no, why have I not done it in that sequence? Oh, okay, I'll do that, which was brilliant. And that really helped me go, okay, shelve it for the day. I feel whole again. I can ignore it and, you know, clean the kitchen. So you can carry it with you. What else do you? So you do. How do you reboot?
I think it's. Oh, how do I reboot? I mean, quite similar, really. I think there's times where there's days. I think, especially if I have a clinic of pelvic pain all day, I get home and I need like a run. I need to almost finish my stress cycle. I feel like I get myself into a bit of a, not that the stress cycle is necessarily bad, it's kind of like a good stress in that kind of state. You know, I've got purpose, I'm driven in that day, and this is brilliant. Next patient through, brilliant. But there is a stress cycle going on in my body, and I have to recognize that, and I have to finish the cycle. That's something that we have to be very aware of, that stress isn't, it's the cycles, and you have to finish them. So it's communicating to your body, right, the stress, in order to the body can then finish its cycle.
That's a really nice point. So so it's really important to always close your stress. So almost like you're saying with your physical things. So you close it with exercise.
Some days I close it with exercise. Some days it could be spending some time in contemplation and meditation, or it can be, so that kind of state of prayer, or it can be something like a hot bath and watching something good on TV and knowing that this weekend I need to kind of get out. I take a lot of fresh air, getting outside, walks is something that really feeds my soul. I really kind of get out there. So I know if I've had a stressful day or a stressful week, that's what I need to do to reboot. Family time is something that really reboots me. So I know, me and my husband will both know if we're going through a phase of work and we both can sense it on each other or ourselves when we need to kind of close our doors and soak up each other as a family. So it's recognizing the different, but it's interesting when you said about the kind of friendship and things. I've noted there's the 5 F's as well, the fitness, food, focus, faith and friendship. And who was it? I think it's by a guy called Rick Warren, and he says that the last two, the kind of faith and friendship, he said is the more he studied into it, he kind of did this plan, this kind of self-care plan, and he found that the last two are actually the kind of dressing on the food. He's like, you cannot kind of live without them. Yet in our culture, where we kind of constantly strive for more and more and more, we seem to be losing the art of friendship and wisdom, which is actually what our hearts are designed for. So in it, I think the whole concept of faith is just about having this mindset of expectation, which I think we can kind of get lost in as a professional as well. And Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about this in chat. I watched a really good chat with her the other day about how if you've got a busy week coming up, or if you've got something where you've got quite a significant event in the week and you think you're kind of getting yourself worked up, about becoming very expectant in a hopeful sense towards the week, because your mind will make your brain shift into a different gear. You're almost giving yourself a placebo effect, but it works. And that in itself will prepare your brain to actually deal with the things in that week better. So you're ready, you deal with the stress or the event or different things in an actually more healthy way. So it's kind of like there's bits that I can do to prevent as well. But I think the whole self-compassion thing, which I've really been, when I thought about it, I think there is a kind of non-dualistic approach to it. There's a yin and a yang, which there is with everything in life. I think there's this kind of tender, loving, kind of gentleness, which is what I promote a lot to my patients. But I remember reading something about it needing to be fierce and forceful as well. And I remember thinking, not that I like the word forceful, but I remember thinking, sometimes I have to be fierce with myself, and I have to be, there's days over Christmas where I'm like, set these days for rest, because I think that's just what we need in our culture. We don't know how to rest. That's our biggest problem. And what I'm asking myself lately, is it that we don't know how to rest, or is it that we don't want to rest, But this whole idea of, okay, I've got say a few nights where I'm resting, but then I'll get thoughts of, but I have got that article in my bag that I really want to read, and I have to be like, no, you have to be forceful with yourself to some extent. And I think that's the balance of self-compassion, is that it needs to, I think I'm quite good at seeing myself from a gentle, tense state, but I'm not very. I have to balance that with, okay, you will rest. Sit down here and do nothing, And I think that's sometimes what maybe is more kind of professionals who are very self-driven and very motivated need a little bit more of, because we're not good at resting. We're not good at it. We've never been taught it properly, and we're the kind of culture that's kind of coming up trying to know how we're going to do this, in a good way.
I get super guilty if I, for a long time, because I worked full time and I worked in the evenings, and then I was doing a master's as well. And I know you're doing all this at the moment, and, having, looking after your family, Mrs. So it's very good that we're talking about this.
Anyone forceful.
Yeah. So I was working 2 jobs and doing a master's, and then I went down to just 1 job and a master's, then was trying to develop this. Currently I've only got 3 and a bit of ongoing research. There's just too much, and you end up working all day, all night until 8 or 9. And even if you're not working because it doesn't feel like you're working. You're on your computer reading stuff or whatever, but you're working. And in the last 6 months, I've definitely made a massive change in just 8 o'clock at night. I am stopping. So last night I got to 8:05 before I'd got through 3 weeks worth of emails. And at that point I went downstairs, and it was like, right, TV's going on, because it just has to be something that is not work. But the amount of guilt that I still carry to not still be working, but it's 8 o'clock at night, and these days I'm tired, so I'd quite like to go to bed by 10. So having a couple of hours with my husband, we shouldn't feel guilty for that. Are you still there? Hello? Resume. I'm going to hope that we haven't lost all that. Right, get into LA. So yeah, we were talking about the guilt of not doing everything all in the world.
Yeah.
And not, actually spending some time, it's like sleeping well or anything else. Spending time doing less work, you end up more compassionate, more able to think laterally, because when we're working in pelvic pain specifically, we have to be able to really think laterally outside the box, pick up on the social cues, on the emotional cues the patient's giving us, really working hard to do all of the soft skills of which are not soft, they're forceful, but skills of giving them space, allowing them to be vulnerable, supporting them in their vulnerability to be able to tell you all the things they need to tell you. And when we kind of don't have enough time for ourselves, you can't work at that level. And if you can't work at that level, I don't know how you feel, but I always beat myself up for just being rubbish, and not being a particularly useful physio. If I'm kind of like, come in, tell me about your prolapse, okay, goodbye. You've got to be a little bit more available to your patient. So
I feel if I know if I'm not present with that patient, I think it's something because I feel maybe I feel so important, or I want to do. So when I'm not, I do feel that guilt, like, I really wasn't there with that patient, and I really should have been. And because I think that makes a difference, I believe in that, because I know it makes a difference.
Yeah.
You
may be the first or only person they've ever talked to about this. And if you're not paying attention, and it's not just about being there with your eyes open, it's about not necessarily living the experience, but certainly trying to understand their experience and bring it in non-judgmentally. There's actually I'm reading a book at the moment, which I'm having a great time reading it, but it makes my blood boil in one section. I'll post it on Twitter later. It's called This Is Gonna Hurt.
All right. Yeah.
A junior doctor, I can't remember his name, Adam Kay. He was a junior doctor, and it's recounting his diaries.
I've read his book.
Absolutely hilarious. He's an obs-and-gynae reg.
Right.
That I'm reading, and he just has one entry about pelvic pain where a woman comes into clinic, and it's quite funny. I mean, but it's absolutely heartbreaking, because she's got pelvic pain, and he kind of really derogatorily explains that she's got pelvic pain, but they haven't found anything on MRI, they haven't found anything on swabs. So he something like he's just going to give her to to pelvic pain clinic, he'll give her some antidepressants and shoo her along on her way. And she throws the needle box at him, which kind of goes all the way around him, and he thinks about all the different forms of HIV that he could have just picked up, but he doesn't, he makes it humorous, but the kind of the macho, horrible, derogatory, not listening to your patient, horrible kind of, we all know it, and we know it from our consultants, because it's not got a biomedical reason. It has, when you understand pain theory, it's got a biomedical reason. But I feel for that patient, and I almost want to get back in touch with her and just say, come and see a pelvic health physio. So I really hope she's got to see a physio. Because he was not present, he didn't listen to her, he didn't have the space to do that. And his own, certainly at one part of his diary, he talks about how you can choose how to be in medicine, and he chose to be forthright, get things done, and not talk about the weather. But that led to some complaints about his personality, and I think we've all been there. And we all get those patients that certainly we're all getting patients better, but the ones that respond well the best to us, the ones that we give some of our time to. And it's not just about being in the room, but being present and listening what that means to a patient, even if you can't do anything about it. Just saying, that's really tough. or having
Yeah,
a word
definitely. I think you start to change. People start to change when they feel understood.
Yeah.
You know, and you can sense that on your patients. And I think what was it I was just going to say? Train of thought that's left my mind. Okay, it's gone.
We'll come back to it. So if we were going to kind of think about the for 2019, the way forward in being more compassionate to ourselves as physios and more compassionate to our patients, I think the kind of themes that we've already talked about is reflecting. I like your 4 R's. I think we need to get them. Reflecting on what is happening in front of you and being present with it, with your own emotional experience, so that whenever someone's telling you something, it may be something completely straightforward, it may be something that triggers a feeling in you, but just being present with that feeling and not judging it. Yeah,
and just validating it. You don't have to know what to do with it. It's okay to just acknowledge a feeling. And sometimes we physically verbalize. I'll talk to myself in the car because there's something that happens when we physically verbalize a feeling. We don't have to come up with a solution. But when you physically verbalize it, acknowledge it, whatever it needs to happen, whether it is healing or whatever, it starts to happen. That's all it needs is acknowledgement.
And that's absolutely true, because there's so many human experiences that I will never, hopefully I will never understand. I mean, a patient that have children with, one that springs to mind, who was absolutely inspiring, had children with learning difficulties herself who'd got older. She worked as a carer and she was fighting for her daughter to be able to keep the baby that she'd been that she was pregnant with currently, or she just had, I can't remember, with social services, and supporting her child through that, while also having quite an abusive relationship at home and lots of pelvic pain issues herself. And you just think, wow. And I remember saying to her, I have no idea how that feels, but that must be really difficult. And just so verbalizing and validating. Okay, so kind of being present, verbalizing, mindfulness. We've touched on it a few times. Loads of people talk about mindfulness. It's absolutely key. We know the chemical and physiological reasons why, but it's massively important in bringing your body out of a state of threat into a growth mindset and a position or situation in which we can use our brain in the best way. So the more that we meditate in whatever form that you want to do that, through movement, through walking, through prayer, through mindfulness, whatever it is, so you get yourself in that state of flow and the blood flow in the brain, because that really helps. What were the other two? The other 2 R's?
There was the replay, rejoice, kind of repent, and the reboot as well. But I think the whole kind of the friendship thing is really important as well. The being able to, giving ourselves time for wisdom and friendship, for that. But the other was to look at things that way. Maybe you haven't loved yourself much that day, or others as well, is really good. It comes into the mindful category though. It's about being mindful, and then it's the reboot. It's what you need to do in order to be ready for tomorrow, which is really good. And I think it's
having access to go on.
Yeah, about being kind of forceful in that as well, about being fierce for yourself as well, knowing that you need it. More than anything, just because you're a good person, you're a good human and you deserve it, but for your patients as well. But knowing that that's kind of, and that's one of the things that I'm just constantly having to learn, is my kind of self-discipline and rest, is the big thing for me, is knowing that we need that. And focus, I think, is the huge thing about what you're saying. That resource sounds amazing, about finding out what your values are, about what your life's focus is, what things do you need to do well in life, and try and keep it to two, maybe 3, and then being aware of things that you need to stop in order so that you can do that. That whole comes into the category of focus. Because there was a few things that I was like, oh, I kind of enjoy that, but it's not kind of but being aware, it does take my time, it does take my energy, and I'm more exhausted coming to the things that I want to do well. So thinking, okay, I'm going to step back from that, and actually feeling a little bit relieved when I step back from it, because sometimes, again, it comes under this fierce thinking, no, but I have to do this for myself. I can come back to this in life. I can come back to this. I can do this again. And needing to give myself that, you know, as I would if I was looking after a child, you know, it's being the carer for yourself, you know. So it's, yeah.
It's all about learning and knowing yourself, isn't it? And it's knowing what drives you. And we share a common passion for treating pelvic pain, but, you know, people gardening, they like all sorts, whatever it is. And getting to that point where you realize it's okay to do and be and like what you like. Okay, you don't have to have fingers in 17 different pies, or to also not to do anything. Getting to that point where human experience now is a validation of yourself, and that you are worthy, you are enough, and everything about, you know, what you want to do should be driving, what you do should be driving you towards what is part of your intrinsic self.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we just need to take some of the pressure off this year.
Definitely.
And the pressure, you know, we're not always going to know the answer with patients. We're not always going to click with every patient, and that's okay as well. Being all right with trying the best that you can, but knowing that it's like, you know, working in any kind of therapy is like running a marathon, or you can liken it to any kind of sport. You've got to be in best physical and mental condition. And if you're not, then you're not going to be able to perform well. So making sure that you fiercely, I love that, fiercely take care of yourself, fierce self-care, compassion, that to know when you're having a bad week, or it's going to be a bad week or a good week, and what you need to do, which is absolutely key. And I had a thought as well, it's gone. We'll come back to my thought.
And knowing that you do make a difference to somebody's life, because, you know, especially all the people I've met doing the kind of on the Bloody Heroes, we're all amazing people. And if you look at the kind of neuron mirroring activity, being in the room with somebody, well, the people, like, if you're in the room with somebody, you're going to make a positive difference in their life because you're awesome. That should be enough. You know, don't have to worry about, you know, all the extra things are great, and I love learning them, and I want to explore more of my skills, practical skills, but it's remembering that because you're awesome, that person's going to benefit from encountering you in their life as well, you know.
And we're all trying to get people better at the end of the day. Yeah, great. Well, I think I'm going to say a huge thank you to you, Katie Kettner, for talking to me all about self-care, and for sharing our thoughts for 2009 and what we should be doing. 2009? Oh my goodness, 10 years out. 2019. I'll try and summarize all of that down below so that everyone can read it and read all about it. And we might do a little update later in the year and see how we're getting on.
Yes, we should. How well we're doing with our fierce and forcefulness.
Exactly, our fierce self-care and compassion.
Fierce self-care, yeah.
But let's start this year being true to ourselves. Knowing that we really need to, your first priority should be to understanding yourself, what you want to be, where you want to go in life, and how to look after yourself, to then be able to provide for other people, and professionally having those limitations and barriers, like we're saying, physical stuff, so that you can go into a room, help someone, and then stop that session and move away from it psychologically, so that it isn't scarring, burning, or depleting on your system, and that you replenish in some way. So really, let's drive forward in 2019 with really physical self-care.
Recognize your needs and giving yourself permission for those needs is really good, really important.
Don't feel guilty if you stop. It's fine to just watch The Crown for 2 hours. It's absolutely fun. Okay, on that note, thank you very much to you.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Look after yourself. You've been fantastic, and I'm sure we will speak soon.
Thank you.
Say bye.
Bye.